This is Vietnam, the country projected to become the third biggest economy in Southeast Asia by 2025. Every day, millions of people flock into the streets to work, and women account for roughly 48.4% of the country's labour workforce. In fact, Vietnam has been ranked globally high in terms of female participation in the job market, and it has outperformed its counterparts in Southeast Asia. A report titled Women's Representation and Leadership in Vietnam showed that women leaders at the director and vice director levels only account for 15.7% at all government levels. Specifically, at the Ministry of Education and Training, the ministry responsible for academic education and higher education in Vietnam, female leaders' representation is only 23%. Compared to other countries, Vietnamese women are underrepresented in senior roles. What might have caused this imbalance? And could an ideology dating back to over 2,500 years ago play a role here? Vietnam is a country with a rich history, a country that has gone through wars, colonisation and reunification. Today, Vietnam is a thriving economy with a GDP of approximately $368 billion. It has a young labour force and hundreds of public universities and private higher education institutions. One thing that has been an important women pillar for the country throughout the course of history is Confucianism. In a country deeply influenced by Confucianism culture, the patriarchal hierarchy remains dominant in the institutional administrative system. Traditionally, Vietnamese women widely accept their ascribed roles in the home. Due to this, leaders frequently confront cultural obligations to take up leadership positions. Dr. Greeni Maheshwari is a senior lecturer and researcher from Management Department, RMIT, Vietnam. One of her latest studies focuses on women's leadership in Vietnamese higher education. According to her study, the first barrier is managing work-life balance.
Managing the work-life balance is always a barrier across the countries, but in Vietnam this is particularly little bit more because the women feel guilty about leaving their home responsibilities, and they fear that they will be looked down, and people will say that you are not giving time to your family or kids, and that is the reason this is holding them back to take the leadership roles.
Admittedly, under Confucianism culture in Vietnam, one of the traditional Confucianism ideologies was to nurture the idea of valuing men and disparaging women, tying women to their domestic responsibilities. Therefore, women personally take childbearing and childcare on their shoulders. These graphs show the difference in women's employment in Asia compared to the West.
Women in Asia, they experience the M-shaped employment curve, and the women in the Western countries, they experience U-shaped employment curve. With M-shape, it indicates that there are women in their 20s, they go to the workforce, and there is a high increase in the employment in their 20s. But when they reach to their 30s, maybe they have a child, so they have to take a break, and they start going back to the work when they reach to their 40s, and again during the retirement age around 55-60 they have to retire. So their career has a lot of breaks. It goes up, then it goes down because of the children. While it was in Western countries, this was not the same. The employment rises in their 20s and it only drops at their 60s, and majorly it is not because of work-life balance or family responsibilities. It is majorly because of if they get ill or the major sickness.
Vietnam adopted Confucianism during the Chinese occupation in Vietnam for more than 1,000 years, from 179 BC to 938 AD. Under feudal dynasties, women were not allowed to participate in any type of learning. One of the most significant impacts manifested in the history of the Vietnamese higher education system was women's participation in universities. The first university in Vietnam was founded in 1076, but enrolled only men. Not until the early 20th century were women allowed to officially enroll in higher education. This explains the root cause of women's subordination in Vietnam.
The second barrier was perceptions of the subordinate. The employers have started looking at the female in the similar way as men, and they are given the opportunities to grow up. But still the subordinates, they are not accepting the women as their leaders.
About 5 decades ago, there was a proverb that went, having a son means having everything. Having 10 daughters means having nothing.
So women has to face the subordinate prejudices, or they are not comfortable considering the women as their leaders.
Women in Vietnam are perceived to to have to work harder than their male counterparts to prove their worthiness while maintaining their duties in family and society. In Asian culture, it can be difficult for women leaders to go to social networking events after work, as they are expected to return home for home duties.
When the woman goes to the party, because it is usually after the working hours, and the woman it is very difficult for women to manage the home and go for such networking events after the working hours.
Women in the Confucius society were traditionally left out of all types of social events. Their life depended entirely on their fathers, brothers, husbands or sons. Living in a culture where women's primary role expectation is a homemaker, some women were satisfied with doing a low-ranking job and taking care of their family rather than getting promoted to leadership roles.
The women were not confident, and the women thought they do not have the skills or the capabilities required to become a leader. So they themselves were holding them back to become the leaders.
For a few decades, Vietnam has been taking steps to change its perceptions of female roles. In 1946, the Constitution of the Democratic Republic of Vietnam provided women with the right to vote for the first time in history. The 1992 Constitution of the Socialist Republic of Vietnam confirmed that women and men are equal in all rights and responsibilities. More significantly, on November 29, 2006, the Vietnamese government passed the Gender Equality Law to promote an equal opportunities for women in all areas. Dr. Maheshwari's study finds that family support plays a role that enables women to take up leadership roles.
Women mentioned that they were receiving the support not only from their family members, direct family members, but they were also receiving the support from their extended family members.
Furthermore, about 60% of participants in the same study agreed that their mentors and line managers' support encourages them to take up leadership positions. Many participants also appreciated women's leadership styles because they are seen to be more empathetic and collaborative. Vietnam is making good progress, with a gender gap index score of 70% in the year 2020 compared to the world's average score of 68.6%. An example of that is that employers have started to shift their mindsets.
When they were asked that how do you hire the candidate to be a leader, and they said we don't care about the gender, we just care about the merit and the capabilities of the candidate. So that was really a positive sign moving forward about gender equality.
Despite all recent positive indicators, it's important to point out that the retirement age for men and women is different in Vietnam. Men retire at 60, while it is 55 years for women. This can be viewed as a disadvantage, as the women already have a shorter working life due to family commitments and career breaks. On top of that, social cultural barriers also contribute to the hindrance in Vietnamese women's career paths. Thus, a low percentage of women representation in higher education offices could be due to personal, societal, cultural and institutional policies in Vietnam. So the question is, what more can Vietnam do to achieve the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal number 5 about gender equality?